My thinking not only controls my life, it determines who I am. Brian Tracy points this out in his audio cassette series, The Psychology of Achievement, when he says, "You are not what you think you are, but what you think you are." My mind versus my computer. My mind has a defective toggle switch. It indiscriminately turns itself off and on, thinks when it should be resting, rests when it should be thinking, and thinks about things it should ignore. Like an ultraviolet light, it stimulates the growth of much that it shines on. The longer it focuses on good things, the better they become. Writing a gratitude list makes me grateful. The longer my mind dwells on bad things, the worse they become. Resentments increase in size and become justifiable. A humorist once remarked that he could have made some useful suggestions if he'd been around at the time of creation. If I'd been there, I'd have suggested that my brain be more like my computer. As computers become more powerful, people who know about such things wonder if computers will ever match the capabilities of the human brain. I think the answer is obvious. Even now, my computer could give my brain a few lessons, especially in matters such as dependability, efficiency, and user-friendliness. If I had my way, my mind, in addition to an off-on switch, would have erase, delete, and rewind capabilities. When I type CLS on my computer, the screen clears itself of whatever we've been working on, and we start over fresh. In fact, when totally confused and not sure what to do next, my computer stops. It refuses to move in any direction. To get it to start over with not a single memory of the confusion, I press Control-Alt-Delete. The screen goes blank. The machine discards all the clutter. In a few seconds, it lights up and, in effect, says, "I'm ready now, let's start over." I learned how to get my computer to do this by reading the owner's manual. Not only can my mind not clear itself of confusion in such an efficient manner, it came with no operating instructions and no manufacturer's guarantee. I'm completely on my own in trying to figure out how to use it. Never, after turning my computer off before going to bed, have I known it to turn itself on in the middle of the night and resume work on a problem we struggled with earlier in the evening. My mind, having a mind of its own, does this all the time. When I finish a project on my computer, it asks, "Do you want to save this?" Yes response guarantees the material will be saved and returned to me later. But only if I request it, and precisely as written. Not a word, not a punctuation mark is altered. My mind doesn't comprehend such servility. It insists on its right to an opinion as to what we will remember and what we will forget. Without any hesitation or explanation, it discards information it doesn't like and remembers facts that aren't so. And when I complain, it argues with me. I choose the program my computer and I are going to work with, depending on what I want to accomplish. I choose a word processor program to process words, a number processor program for numbers, an idea processor for ideas, or a data processor for data. My computer always agrees with my choice, and that's what we work on until I decide to do something different. Not so my mind. My mind jumps from one totally unrelated subject to another with no regard for anything else. Later, considering all the effort we put into the project, it wonders why we accomplished so little. The noise. Furthermore, while my computer gives off a rather pleasant, mild, steady hum, my brain commonly puts out ceaseless chatter of varying intensity. Before I realized what was going on, this drove me to drink. In sobriety, I've come to realize that my mind talks to me. It talks all the time, day and night. It doesn't do any physical work. It just talks. Talk, 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 talk. And by its talking, it controls my thinking, my feelings, my actions, my life. In years past, I tried to control the talking with chemicals. Today, I avoid all mind-affecting substances. Even a mild drug like caffeine stimulates the talk to talk, 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 talk. And at bedtime, when my body wants to go to sleep, my mind insists, no, let's lie here and talk a while. After I get to sleep, around 3 a.m., it sometimes shouts, hey, wake up. We've had an emergency meeting up here, and we need to talk to you. You know that situation you thought you handled so well today? Well, it wasn't like that at all. People are really upset with you. Wait till morning, you'll find out. I decide not to listen to such nonsense. I roll over and go back to sleep. Just as I'm about to lose consciousness, I think, boy, I'm sure glad I'm not thinking about that anymore. But my mind hears me thinking and calls out, oh, I'm glad you're still awake. You know, that's not the only dumb thing you've done. You did the same thing about 6 months ago. In fact, you've done a lot of dumb things in your life. Let's spend the rest of the night lying here, making a list of all the dumb things you've done. You must be one of the dumbest people we've ever met. Sometimes this chatter goes on while I sleep, and I awaken in the morning feeling anxious or confused, my day ruined before it has started. I decided this morning discomfort results from conversations that go on in my head during the unremembered dreams. Evening meetings come too late in the day to take care of this problem, so I convinced friends to help me start a meeting the first thing in the morning, 7 days a week. We call them attitude adjustment meetings. The format includes the statement, quote, this is not a meeting devoted so much toward reliving the past as toward developing the appropriate attitudes for living this particular day successfully, end quote. They are topic discussion meetings, and they've changed my life. If you have a problem like mine, try morning meetings, but be careful, they're quite addictive. The committee in my head. Anytime I'm alone with my mind, I'm outnumbered. Unsupervised, my mind consists of a talkative, rowdy, unorganized group of personalities with no apparent plan or sense of direction. Until recovery, I hadn't realized that, at birth, I was expected to assume the role of chairman of the group. We, the personalities and I, traveled through life like a crowded tour bus with no driver. One of the passengers drove for a while in any direction. After a while, another passenger took over without talking to the first. Later, a third drove wherever he wanted until someone took over from him. Later, we all wondered why we never got anywhere. We had a similar problem with drinking. In the morning, one of us would decide to quit drinking forever. In the evening, another of us, without talking to the first, would have a drink. I had a serious communication problem in that the different parts of my brain weren't talking to each other. Few concepts have been more important to my long-term total sobriety than the realization that my mind is composed of multiple personalities. As a group, these personalities can't make sensible decisions unless I act as chairman and bring order to their meetings. Each individual has a definite opinion and a narrow point of view. One, for example, is always afraid, no matter what action is suggested. If it is at all unfamiliar, he insists, no, 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 don't do that. You'll screw it up and they'll laugh at you. He offers no other suggestion, ever. Another personality has the opposite opinion. Man, he says, as long as you're sober, you can go anywhere, face anyone, and do anything you want. There's no way anyone can harm you except to make you take a drink. And as long as you have this program, no one can make you take a drink if you don't want to. You have absolutely nothing to fear, ever. One of them up there doesn't care much for Max, my wife. He never has. He obsessively watches her and reports back to me asking questions like, "Did you see what she just did? Are you going to let her speak to you in that tone of voice? Does she realize who she's talking to?" Another personality thinks Max is wonderful. He points out how attractive she is and what a great sense of humor she has. He tells me how lucky I am to have a partner who, in the beginning, even though not alcoholic, went to AA meetings after I decided to quit, and who still attends AA meetings while remaining an active, participating, enthusiastic member of Al-Anon. Listening to this personality instead of the fault finder has helped us to stay happily, most of the time, married for over 55 years so far. One lifelong problem in keeping the committee peaceful is the presence in my head of a cynical voice that passes judgment on everything that happens. It's like having a saboteur at the highest level of security, where every piece of incoming information goes to his desk first. He stamps it with comments like, "This is unfair. This is awful. You shouldn't have to put up with this. Who do they think they're talking to? You're being taken again. Don't let them get away with this." He, like the personality who specializes in justifying resentments, loves his work. He takes pride in his ability to pick out the flaw, the defect, the fault, the things that are wrong with people, places, things, and situations. And he delights in pointing them out to me. As a result, very little entered my life before the program without first being judged bad, frightening, or dangerous. This kept me in the role of victim with the attitude, "See how difficult my life is compared to other people? You mustn't expect too much of me." Of all the personalities in my head, only one, thank God, is alcoholic. He has a loud mouth and a pushy personality. With the slightest provocation, or none at all, he shouts, "Hey, let's have a drink." I used to pay a lot of attention to him, and he often got me drunk when I wasn't even thinking about drinking. Now that I realize who is talking, instead of hearing his comment as a command, I take it as a mere suggestion. I consider the source, remember what it used to be like, and say, "Thank you for your participation. Now, if you'll sit down, we'll call on someone else." He grumbles a bit, moves to the back of the room, and waits for his next opportunity. He is the only personality in my head who likes to see me drink. The others want me sober. I've discovered two important factors that influence my conversations with the personalities in my head. First, getting angry really stimulates them. They love to argue. Second, the personalities I listen to the most move to the front of the room, where they dominate our conversation and talk the loudest and the longest. Those I ignore drift to the rear and tend to remain quiet. No one ever leaves. The alcoholic personality will always be there waiting to speak up as soon as he thinks I might be in the mood to listen and to carry on a conversation with him. The center of calm. In contrast to the surrounding noise in the deepest part of me, in the last place I would have thought to look, I've discovered a center of calm an area of peace, joy, and serenity. My higher power resides there. He always has, but I didn't know it. And not knowing God is within is a lot like not having a personal God. My situation is not unique. Our higher power resides in the center of each of us. Check it out the next time you wake in the middle of the night, or while sitting quietly during a meeting, or at the end of a meeting during the prayer. Instead of closing your eyes or looking at the floor, look around the room into the eyes of other alcoholics. Notice how you smile instinctively when your higher power recognizes the higher power in the other person. After finding God in the center of me, I decided to become friendly with the various personalities in my head. I've learned to love them even when I dislike their behavior, when their suggestions are impractical, unwise, silly, even lewd or illegal. I realize their intentions are good. They, like so-called dysfunctional parents, are trying to help me in the only way they know how. I no longer fight them, nor do I demand their silence. Neither do I let them fight among themselves. Instead, I have them talk and write letters back and forth to each other and to me. They've quieted down considerably since learning to freely express their fears and emotions. And since my higher power and I now generally act together as chairman of the group, they are happier and function more efficiently. We listen to their suggestions. Then my higher power and I decide what we as a group are going to do and what we are going to think about. Formerly, as mentioned earlier, all decisions were left to the personalities that shouted the loudest. According to the law of appreciation, whether we realize it or not, each of us determines the quality of our lives by choosing our thoughts. The law of appreciation states that absolutely nothing on earth is totally good or totally bad. Good and bad coexist according to the law in every person, place, thing, law, situation, institution, or combination thereof. In addition, it says that by focusing our attention on the good, we make the good better. And by focusing on the bad, we make the bad worse. Thus, people who complain always have something to complain about. And people who smile always have something to smile about. They're both right. It's as though our thoughts have energy, and whether for good or evil, we transfer that energy into the subject of our thoughts. Worry puts energy into the problem. Prayer and meditation put energy into the program. Insisting that we can think only one thought at a time, author Emmett Fox suggested what he called the golden key as the solution to any problem. He claimed that any problem, no matter how big or how small, can be golden keyed. He described the method as substituting a spiritual thought the minute the problem comes to mind. For example, instead of thinking about the problem, immediately and repeatedly recite the Serenity Prayer, or a favorite spiritual axiom such as, "If God be with me, who can be against me?" Ultimately, the bigger the problem, the higher the resultant level of spirituality of the person using this technique. Problems. All my problems today are thinking problems. I don't even have a problem unless I think I do. If I think I have a problem, I have a problem. If I don't think I have a problem, I don't have a problem. Never have I thought I had a problem and been wrong. Not only do I alone decide whether or not I have a problem, I alone determine the size of my problems. I don't have many little problems. I don't bother with them. Like resentments, I stick to the justifiable variety. When I do have a little problem, all I have to do to make it a big problem is to think about it. As a boy, I read in Reader's Digest that you can judge a man by what makes him angry. From then on, I searched for problems worthy of my anger. As a physician, I dedicated my life to working on problems, my own or anyone else's. I became a problem magnet. When I couldn't find enough of my own, I borrowed yours. My, that's an interesting problem you have there. May I have it for a while? Meanwhile, I exaggerated, inflated, and manufactured problems while remaining on the lookout for more, and I always found them. I was like the young woman at an Al-Anon meeting who said her father told her as a child, quote, "Most of the things we worry about don't happen," end quote. So, ever an obedient child, she established a worry policy. She protected herself by worrying about things in order to keep them from happening. She displayed the kind of logic that says, most auto accidents occur within 20 miles of your home, so move. Until recovery, I too believed in the positive power of worry. I believed worry, like an invisible plastic shield, kept problems from getting to me. If they did get through or over to me, I didn't feel guilty because I knew I'd done my best. Problems have always enjoyed a position of exaggerated importance in my life. Early on, I came to the conclusion that the people with the most problems get the most attention. People don't want to hear how easy your life is. They want to hear about problems. The TV evening news stresses nothing else. Facing problems is the stuff of which heroes are made. Without problems, you wouldn't have an identity. How can people think of you as being heroic if they didn't know you're surviving in spite of it all? So tell them. Whine a little. I grew up thinking all men of intelligence and stamina worked on their problems by thinking about them until they came up with an answer. I've discovered that approach works the opposite for me. Problems I think about grow bigger and bigger, even non-problems. At first I'll think, well, that's certainly not a problem. But in a short time I can see where it could be a sort of problem. Soon I'm thinking, say, this is a bit of a problem. In no time I'm telling myself, by golly, it's a good thing I'm looking at this, everyone else is missing it. One of the problems with problems is their high infant mortality rate. Ignored, they, like delicate plants, wither and die. Problems need a continuous flow of conversation, plus a lot of water and fertilizer, especially fertilizer. They demand constant attention. Problems need to feel important. Have you ever had a problem so delicate you couldn't leave it long enough to go to a meeting? Tonight is meeting night. Are you going to be there? Oh, no, I have to stay home and work on my problem. You know, if you waste time going to a meeting, by the time you get back, your problem may have wilted to the point where you might not be able to bring it back. Problems refuse to be ignored. When we work with newcomers and other alcoholics, they disappear. They get bored waiting and leave to find someone willing to give them the uninterrupted attention they demand. In general, we do the same thing. Most often, we don't solve our problems. We merely tire of them and move on to something else. Think, do, feel. In years past, I often watched myself as I behaved in a totally unacceptable manner, drinking, slamming doors, saying things I didn't want to say, doing things I didn't want to do. As a practicing alcoholic, I lacked self-control. Today I see myself as a spiritual being with 3 distinct human facets. I am what I think. I am what I do. I am what I feel. And to the degree that I control my thinking, I control my actions. To the degree that I control both my thinking and my actions, I control my feelings. Then the circle is completed when my feelings affect my thinking, which again affects my actions. I might, for example, think to myself, I'd like to do something nice for Max. I'll buy her some flowers. My thinking has inspired me to take an action. As a consequence of buying the flowers, I feel good. Indeed, I feel so good I think, that was a good idea. I'll do it again soon. Of the three, thinking, actions, and feelings, actions are, in many respects, the most important. As Clancy I has said at meetings, they don't lock us up for thinking crazy, they only lock us up for acting crazy. We may, for example, think obsessively about drinking, and we may dream drinking dreams, but we don't lose our sobriety unless we pick up a drink and drink it. People see us as alcoholics because of our drinking, not because of our thinking. I recall a young woman at an AA meeting saying she couldn't see why people thought she was an alcoholic until she realized they were judging her by her actions, while she was judging herself by her intentions. Like her, I always focused proudly on my good intentions, my thinking, while excusing my behavior. In AA, we frequently hear action slogans such as, keep coming back. Action is the magic word. Bring the body and the mind will follow. You can't think yourself into right acting, but you can act your way into right thinking. Sit down, shut up, and listen. Such action-based admonitions are intended to get new people to take specific actions without thinking, without judging the value of the suggestions. Indeed, Robin Dawes, after criticizing much of modern psychiatric theory, ends her book, House of Cards, with the statement, quote, most important of all, there is no evidence that for the majority of people a change of internal state and feeling is necessary prior to behaving in a beneficial way. There is, in contrast, good evidence that changing our behavior will change our internal state and feelings. Just do it. End quote. However, any action more complicated than a simple knee-jerk response must be preceded by a thought, even if the thought is as simple as, okay, I'll do it. Actions require at least minimal thinking. My actions are determined by my thinking, and I alone am responsible for my thinking. Furthermore, since my thinking and my actions determine my feelings, I am responsible for my feelings. I can't honestly say, you made me angry. If you do something offensive and I become upset by thinking how selfish and inconsiderate you are, my thinking upsets me, not your behavior. I may tell you I am upset, but I must realize my being upset comes from me, not out of you or your behavior. This is the basis of the statement in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions that says, quote, it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us, end quote. Because of my frequent failure to remember this axiom and to control my thinking, I have given the entire matter to my higher power. First, I remind him of my powerlessness and the unmanageability of my life. Then I turned over to his care not only my will and my life, but everything I think, feel, and do. He handles it all quite well most of the time, but on occasion I've had to reprimand him. For God's sake, God, what did you have me say, do, think, feel, that for? Are you paying any attention up there? If nothing else, this policy gives me someone with whom to share the blame when I function in a bizarre manner. We hear a lot about feelings these days. They're all the rage in mental health counseling. Feel your feelings, give them a name, and express them instead of acting them out. That's the message of the therapists. Just as Christians have many religious sects to choose from, so psychotherapists have at least 400 different schools of therapy to consider. Additional methods continue to evolve, while Freudian psychoanalysis, with its ruminations about the past, continues to fade in popularity. One of the most practical of these newer methods is cognitive thinking therapy. To use this technique, clients begin by becoming aware of their thinking, that is, their inner conversation with themselves. Then by writing out their thoughts, they learn to change their thinking. Dr. David Burns effectively treats depression in this manner. He explains the method in Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy. Another psychotherapeutic technique, one that deals almost exclusively with the present, is that of the psychiatrist William Glasser. Both his method and his book are entitled Reality Therapy. Glasser teaches his clients to think, behave, and feel realistically toward the reality of their current life, rather than to dwell on their past life. In his lectures, Glasser points out the foolishness of clients who, instead of working to change themselves, want others, usually their parents, to change, and want them to do it now, retroactively, in spite of the fact that they are often long since dead. These are but two examples of psychological approaches designed to change thinking in order to change feelings. In the next and subsequent chapters, we'll discuss additional methods for maintaining emotional sobriety. Attitudes and beliefs. Over the years, I've learned quite a bit from various psychiatrist and psychologist friends and writers. Yet for some reason, I was particularly impressed on a Sunday morning at the Ohio Street meeting in Los Angeles when an AA member made the simple pronouncement, "Happiness is the absence of unhappiness." Such a simple profundity, and yet I was startled. To be happy, merely stop finding reasons to be unhappy? All I have to do is change my thinking? My philosophy had always been, you'd be unhappy too if you had my life. Let me tell you about it. Today I realize that not only does my thinking control my feelings and my actions, it controls two additional, extremely important facets of my personality: my attitudes and my spiritual beliefs. God doesn't exist in my life in a personal way unless I either decide to believe He exists or decide to live my life as if I believed He exists. Either decision profoundly affects my attitude, and my attitude affects just about every aspect of my life. Philosopher Baruch Spinoza didn't believe in the existence of God as a separate entity. He saw all objects, including humans, as part of God's self-expression. He thought of God as reality, as being identical with the world as we know it. At first, I discarded this as the thinking of an atheist. More recently, I decided that if, as the Bible says, God created the world in 6 days, rested for one, and has been busy creating reality ever since, then reality is the way in which God manifests Himself. In this sense, then, reality is God, or is, in this life, all we will ever know of God. My days, one at a time, consist of reality created by God, plus my attitude created by me. God and I are thus co-creators of my day. The question becomes whose contribution is greater in determining the quality of my day. Most days it seems to be mine. I believe that each day God gives me everything I need to have a good day. My choice of attitude determines whether or not I enjoy His gift. As someone said, it's hard to have a good day with a bad attitude, and it's hard to have a bad day with a good attitude. Every day is a good day. Whether or not I see it as such is up to me. Progressing in sobriety. Alcoholics are labeled alcoholic because of their behavior. Their behavior changes as they change their thinking. With a change in behavior and a change in thinking, it should be easy to stay sober. And it would be if we didn't have feelings, and if we didn't let other people control how we feel. Comfortable long-term sobriety demands that we pay attention to this matter. We'll talk about that next. Chapter 3. Emotional sobriety. Feeling. Who's in charge here? Thanks to AA, the people we alcoholics live with no longer drive us to drink. But some days they push us to the city limits where a lot of drinking takes place, and dry drunks turn into slips. Yet as often as I found myself out there on the outskirts of emotional sobriety, not once did I ask myself why I always accepted the role of passenger on these trips. It never occurred to me to do the driving myself, to take a leadership role and end up where I wanted to be, rather than where someone was taking me. When drinking, I often couldn't see that I wasn't physically sober. In recovery, I often can't see that I am not emotionally sober. As when drinking, I don't recognize my change of personality. I think it's the other person who has changed, not me. When I was drinking, I often got drunk when I didn't mean to. Sometimes when I hadn't even planned on drinking. All sorts of situations, usually involving people, got me started. Not until I made a commitment to sobriety, not until I made it my top priority could I stay physically sober. That left me to deal with my emotions. I'd never put any great value on my emotional sobriety. I would often, in a sense, throw it at people who didn't want it and didn't know they had it. People on the freeway, for instance. Today I'm willing to go to any length at all, to maintain my physical sobriety, and as time goes by, I'm willing to go to increasingly greater lengths to maintain my emotional sobriety. It feels good to feel good. Besides, there's always that underlying possibility that if I lose my emotional sobriety badly enough and long enough, I might decide, oh, what's the use, and take a drink. I don't want that to happen. It must feel awful to return to drinking and end up with a head full of AA and a belly full of booze. Certainly, it's no fun to be emotionally drunk with a head full of AA and a belly full of resentments. Success meant control. In 1930, at age 12, during the Great Depression, I hurried home to tell my family I had negotiated the purchase of a newspaper route. I knew they'd be pleased, and in later years would look back on this event as the beginning of what had become a vast financial empire. Instead, my father was not pleased. No son of his would have an outside job. What would the neighbors and customers think if the son of the neighborhood druggist had to have a newspaper route to bring in extra money? My father would look like a failure. That he could not allow. Although I canceled the purchase of the newspaper route, obeying my father was not my primary mistake. More important was my acceptance of his value system, which said other people's opinions of me were more important than my own. Throughout my school years, all history classes gave recognition to the men and women who made a name for themselves by managing, controlling, and affecting the lives of others. In and out of school, I heard the message: to get anywhere, you've got to impress, control, manipulate, compete with, and at the same time get along with the people in your life. Look, for example, at the struggles between couples in relationships, between children and their parents, between employees and their employers. Nations and politicians fight with each other all the time. Even members of so-called AA clubs can't always get along well together. Life, apparently, is a struggle for power. Either be in control or be controlled. I lost control. Meanwhile, I couldn't control my drinking. I couldn't control it once I started, and I couldn't keep from starting. The more I lost control, the harder I fought for it. The more my disease extended into other areas of my life, the harder I fought to control the people, places, things, and situations involved in the problem. I know now that this is rather typical behavior for an alcoholic. I even continued my control efforts after being admitted as a patient to the mental health unit of a hospital of which I was a medical staff member. I spent my time in the psycho unit writing notes, letters, and lists of things for my wife, Max, to do to keep the world running while I sat in a locked ward. Today I can see that didn't make much sense. On the other hand, neither did the fact that she returned of her own free will every day to pick up her list. AA doesn't teach control. In AA, instead of hearing about control, I heard about powerlessness, unmanageability, surrender, acceptance, let go and let God. After 7 months of this sort of indoctrination, I turned my critical judgment off and began to do the things my future sponsor and other sober alcoholics suggested as the way to stay sober. Among other things, I discovered that, just as drinking is an activity, so is sobriety. According to our recovery program, powerlessness extends far beyond the question of drinking. The steps declare our powerlessness over our own lives. The traditions state that, being equal, no one of us has power over any of the rest of us. The concepts state that Alcoholics Anonymous will never take punitive action in an effort to control any alcoholic. The Big Book says that we no longer fight anyone or anything. In Al-Anon, I heard someone say, the more you try to control another person, the more you're under that person's control. If what you do next depends on whether they do or don't do whatever it is you are trying to get them to do or not do, then you are under that person's control. All of this contradicts everything I already knew about life. I had always kept my focus out there, on others, on people I didn't like, on people I resented. Then, as mentioned earlier, I heard a speaker in AA say, happiness is the absence of unhappiness. And I remembered Chuck C. repeatedly saying, happiness is an inside job. These thoughts, combined with the idea that AA stands for Altered attitudes launched me on a search for the mental, emotional, and spiritual sobriety which lie on the far side of physical sobriety.